Well, thanks so much for joining us, Peter. Appreciate it. So let's talk about the FIRE movement. For people who may have not heard of this, just tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't give it that name, but the basic idea is I like to call it early retirement, and FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. And the basic idea is money is not as hard as people think. And if you save a pretty good amount through your younger years, in my case, it was through my 20s, then you can make work optional by the time you're a lot younger than conventional retirement age.
And how long has this idea been around? When did this kind of all start?
That's debatable. I mean, some people say it dates back to ancient philosophy, but the first thing that's in modern culture that I'm aware of is this book called I forget what it was. It was like not The Millionaire Next Door, but there was another one earlier that was by Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez. And it is they talked about an early retirement that they pursued way back in the 80s and 90s, and they taught that worldwide. So those ideas got embedded into the culture. And then I kind of discovered stuff on my own. And then I realized I was just walking the same path that other people did. And it's been great for me. And now I see more people are discovering it every day or every year. So it's pretty widespread now among a certain group of us.
Yeah. Well, tell me, for someone who's like, well, that sounds good, but how do I do that? Like, what's sort of the general, obviously the path might be a little different for each person, but like what are some of the general concepts?
Yeah, well, the real general concept is that your time to reach an early retirement, it doesn't depend on all these different complex factors, like your pension and all these rates and how old you are and what your income is. What it really boils down to is how much of your income can you save as a percentage. So if you can save 50% of your take-home paycheck, you can actually have enough to retire with only 17 years of work. So in other words, if you start at 20 years old, you'd be rich enough to retire at 37. And I kind of did that myself inadvertently by starting at around 20. I was saving over half of my salary along with my then fiance. And our goal was to be financially independent by the time we reached 30 in order to have our first child. And we actually did that. And now I'm 50 years old, about to turn 51, and I've been retired for over 20 years now. And yeah, so to me, it seems very obvious, but there's still people who are surprised when they hear these numbers pretty much every day.
Some people might hear that and think, oh, well, you have to make a lot of money. Is that the case?
It gets easier when you make more money, of course, because if you want to have the standard amenities of an American middle class life, like a house and a car, it's going to be really hard to do that on minimum wage and save half your income. But it's actually a lot better than what people would think. And there's just a lot of tricks you can do to get more efficient at spending your money and really just get the same value and satisfaction out of your life while cutting out more of the waste. And that's what my whole blog is devoted to. I've written something like 500 articles over the past decade on just like how to cut this, how to cut that, how to have more fun with this situation that happens to cost less. So if there's a will, then there's a way.
Okay, well, give us some of the tricks. What do you think are some of the biggies that have made a big difference for you and others?
Well, I like to focus on the biggest one being transportation, because as Americans, we love our cars and we like to spend a lot of money on them and do a lot of driving. And the problem with this is, and I'm a car guy too, I love cars. I have a fast car, I've had fast motorcycles too, but um, don't everyone does more than they can afford. And because that's all around us, we all assume that's normal. So it's not cool to borrow money for a car. Like you should only spend money that you actually have on a car. And yet something like 90% of people stretch beyond the money they have to get a car loan. That's like your first piece of financial suicide right there. Most people live too far from work. They drive on a whim, like, oh, let's just check out what's, happening at the lake 60 miles away without realizing that's costing them like, let's say $100 every time they do a major outing on a weekend. And I'm not saying don't drive or give up your car, but just be aware of how much it costs and it might shift your balance a little bit. Like, yeah, maybe I will choose this house that's closer to work, or I'll choose this job next time I switch jobs that's closer to my home. And stuff like that can make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars over like a single decade. Most people are thinking about just the next tank of gas, but they should be thinking 10 years in advance or even 20 years in advance of like the implications of these choices we're making.
Yeah, you've got the car, you've got the insurance, all kinds of expenses. Okay, what are some of the other tips?
Well, I mean, there's always food, of course. That's another big one. And especially as we get up into the middle class, we follow our peers and we just go out for dinner a few times a week. And then there's happy hours and drinks are what, like 10 or $15 nowadays when you're at a nice venue. And all that stuff is fun and it's worth keeping in your life purposefully, but it's not worth doing just because everyone else is doing it. And that can make a difference of $500 to $1,000 a month for a family, which over the course of a decade is like another $172,000 is how I think of it. $1,000 a month becomes 172 over 10 years because if you invest that money, it starts to compound over this longer period of time. So food is another one. Housing, I mean, I'm a house guy. I'm not going to compromise on having a nice place, but I do like to do my own maintenance and construction on my house, which is not for everybody, but the more skills you have, the more you can have a nice place without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every time you want an upgrade, like you should be able to build a deck and fix your water heater and install a dishwasher. And if you spend your weekends doing that instead of watching too much streaming TV or whatever, these skills tend to build up over time. And now that's my favorite thing to do is just construction and building, even though I've been retired for so long.
Yeah. Okay. Any other suggestions?
Well, I don't know. You're pressing me for doing stuff on the fly here. I've got a whole blog for this kind of stuff,
Okay.
but health and fitness is maybe the final one. Is that
Mhm.
the more you prioritize that, like putting a morning walk at the beginning of each day and doing weight training and not just skipping your workouts every day, it's going to make a bigger and bigger difference in as you get to my age in terms of like less chance of chronic diseases, less chance of problems that come up from your body not being where you want it to be. And it also impacts your energy level and your focus and how good you are at your job, right? Like we live in a discriminatory country somewhat where like the healthier and better looking you are, the more people want to hire you. So you can like game that system just by being a bit healthier than the next person in the job line. So health and fitness is really underrated in our country. And guess what? It doesn't cost much money, if anything, to lift some weights and go on a walk every day. And that also takes up some of your time that you would have spent spending money on other things.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what have you noticed about people that have gone through this process and maybe they've achieved being able to retire early. Tell us, like, I mean, it's life changing. So tell me a little bit about what you've observed when people go through this. I imagine it was maybe difficult for some in the beginning.
Well, I've never found it difficult because I've always just kind of walked my own way, and people from the outside might have thought I was a weirdo, but I was perhaps unaware of it. So for me, I just lived the way I wanted to live, and the money built up, and I'm like, great, we're done with work. What I find is, as these ideas have spread to other people, a lot of people find the same way. Like, as long as you're making conscious choices and choosing these win-win things that save money, but also make your life better, then you're not really sacrificing much. I mean, it is possible to go really far, and some people enjoy that. And if you do enjoy it, that's great. But I try to push people not to go too far and say, like, yeah, eating food you don't enjoy, or like nobody should be nagging their spouse to take a shorter shower or anything like that to save money. You should be focusing on things that are actually rewarding because there's plenty of money to go around. Just focus on the waste is what I think. So in general, it's been almost 100% positive. I mean, who doesn't want to have more money and control of their life and more freedom? As long as you do it right, I just think it's a way of being more thoughtful and getting better at spending, and that frees up your mind to do other stuff.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about it can improve your family relationships because you have more time for your spouse and your kids.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing. So the reason we retired, my fiance and I at the time, is that um, we wanted to be super parents, right? We didn't want to split our time between, um, you know, being really good at our career and really being really good parents. So that's worked out really well. Like my son is now 20 years old, and it's been like the best dad experience I could possibly have. Now, I'm not going to pretend it solves all your problems. Like my wife and I did separate. We're now we're with new people and very happy about that. But even going through a divorce is a lot easier when there's no monetary stress, right? Like people can peacefully go their own ways. They're not fighting over scarce resources. Each person has a great life to go on with afterwards. And we're great friends. We live in the same neighborhood, and I'm not in favor of shaming people for how their relationships work out. I just want people to have more time and energy to put into the relationships that are right for them.
Yeah. Um, is there like a formula that is suggested to help people figure out, when they can actually do an early retirement?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like to think of this thing. I didn't invent it, but it's a good guideline for how much you need. And I call it the 4% rule. And if you have, let's say, $1 million of investments, just because that's a round number, that's pretty reliably is going to kick out $40,000 a year of spendable money every year for the rest of your life. That's going to also increase with inflation. So you don't have to worry about that money diminishing over time. Or if you flip 4% on its head, you can think of it as the 25 times rule. So if you take your spending, especially once you've optimized it and you've cut out all the fat and you're spending on only things that you really value, multiply that by 25, and that's how much you need to retire. So if you could, in theory, live on, let's say, just double that, like $80,000 a year, then you'd need $2 million invested, which is a lot of money. So that's why I encourage people to work at it from both ends, like get really good at saving, obviously do well in your career so you can earn more, but get really good at spending so that you don't need as much to retire. And that's kind of what I specialized in, even though I was a relatively good earner as a computer engineer way back in the day. I also happen to live on a lot less without even realizing. I thought I was spending a lot. And I still do that to this day, even though my means have increased over the last decade since I retired through a lot of good fortune. I still only spend about 25 to $30,000 a year, and that's with like everything I could possibly want to buy. And I try to spend more, but it just tends to average back out again.
Wow, that's really impressive. What advice would you give to someone who wants to try this? Do you suggest that they make changes kind of in steps, or like, what advice would you give them to get started?
Yeah, just be purposeful about it. I would always say the first place to start is with your spending, and understand it. Most people don't really even track their spending. So at the very minimum, take your credit card bills for the last few years and put them in front of you and ideally add them up into categories. So how much did I spend on car stuff and on groceries and on house stuff? And if you have debt, then obviously you're going to see a large number for interest and paying back this debt. And that's your starting point. And then you can see what can be cut and optimized. For a lot of people, it's paying off their high interest debt first, because that's just an easy, like every of that you pay off is going to start paying back to you immediately in terms of less interest you're giving away to these big companies. But then there's just a lot more you can do. And as you get more capable, you can make bigger changes more easily. And for a lot of people, it's going to end up being moving to like my biggest step that I love to suggest is if you're in a house or a neighborhood that's not right for you, then get ready for a move because that can often improve a lot of things at once. It can cut your commute. It can put you in a better place for your kids potentially. And the less time you spend in cars, the healthier you're going to be and the more money you're going to be able to keep for yourself. So, yeah, most people end up, finding a better place to live over time. And I'm always in favor of, I mean, even now, I'm planning another move for myself within the next year just because I like to keep myself, on my toes and get a new house project to work on and live closer to whatever I'm doing in the coming years.
As we've been talking, I had one question pop up in my head and just wondering, what do you do about health insurance? Most people get their health insurance through work, or, when they reach a certain age, they can use, Medicare. So I'm just curious, what typically do people do when they do retire early for that?
Absolutely. Most people who retire early, they buy their own health insurance on the private market. And you might remember the Affordable Care Act made it less expensive to do that and a lot more predictable. There's a lot more tricks that have been like regulated out so the insurance companies can't trick you as much. So if you've never bought your own health insurance, it seems scary because you're like, oh, you have to get that through your employer, right? But it's not really as expensive as you'd think. Like for example, for me as a 51-year-old, it's about $400 or $500 a month. And that's, it's a significant cost, but some people imagine that it's $3,000 a month or something because they've seen like the Cobra figures from, like an optional insurance that happens when you quit your job. It's not really that much. And then I also there's other alternatives too nowadays, like health sharing plans that are an alternative to insurance. And for example, there's one called Sedera that a lot of people in the early retirement community use, and it's pretty above board, like efficient, lower cost. Um, there's ways to solve it. You do have to budget for it a little bit, unless you want to be super risky and just be fully self-insured. But unless you have millions of dollars, you could potentially, get wiped out by a really large medical cost. And a lot of people aren't willing to take that risk, which I think is smart.
Yeah. Any resources? I'll put Mr. Money Mustache, the blog, in there. But any other resources you would recommend people check out?
Yeah, I mean, I have my own thing called a boot camp. It's just a free email service series that gives you an email once a week, and it tries to make it easy to learn this, and that's free, of course. But if you look up the FIRE movement, you'll probably just see a lot of things. If you're a podcast person, you might enjoy the Mile High Fi podcast, or the Choose Fi podcast is a good one. That's a really popular one. There's YouTube channels about it. And there's a couple named the Donegans, Alan and Katie Donegan, who run something called Rebel Finance School. And that's really fantastic. It teaches you everything from A to Z in terms of like saving, investing, even business formation. Another free course, they offer that because they're also early retired and they just like connecting with people. And now there's tens of thousands of people who take that course every year. So they run it live from all over the world. And it's a very giving community, right? I mean, people find their independence. They kind of want to give back and they have a lot of free time. And that's why in the FIRE community, you'll probably see a lot of stuff is free or super low cost because in general, it's not a salesy environment. People aren't really trying to make money off of this because we already have our money taken care of. And that's what I want for other people, right? Like you tend to become a nicer person if you are no longer scrambling for money and feeling like you have to compete with the next guy.